My name is Diana Lockwood, and I'm 30 years old. I stared at my reflection in horror, my waist-length hair now reduced to an uneven bob. My parents, Amy and Howard, stood in the doorway, scissors in hand. "It's Rebecca's wedding day," Mom whispered. "She deserves to shine." 6 hours later, I watched my sister cry at her own reception, mascara streaming down her face as our parents looked on in horror. They'd always favored Rebecca, but cutting my hair while I slept crossed a line. They thought making me less pretty would stop me from outshining the bride. They had no idea what they'd just set in motion. I still remember how my hands trembled as I held the chopped strands of my hair that morning. If you're watching this and have ever experienced family betrayal, you know that sick feeling in your stomach when people who should protect you become the ones who hurt you. I'd love to know where you're watching from and if you've ever experienced family favoritism. Hit that like button if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members, and subscribe to follow my journey of how I turned this hair nightmare into the perfect revenge. Let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up as the second daughter in the Lockwood family was an exercise in invisibility. From my earliest memories, it was clear that Rebecca, older by just 2 years, was the sun around which our family orbited. Our childhood home in suburban Connecticut was a shrine to Rebecca's achievements, shelves lined with her dance trophies, walls covered with her academic certificates, and refrigerator door plastered with her artwork. My own accomplishments, while not insignificant, were acknowledged with a pat on the head and quickly forgotten. Christmas mornings told the same story year after year. Rebecca would unwrap expensive electronics, designer clothes, and once even keys to a car on her 16th birthday. I'd receive practical items, socks, school supplies, or books, useful but lacking the excitement and thought put into Rebecca's gifts. When I brought home straight A's, my parents would nod and say, "That's expected." When Rebecca managed a B+, they'd celebrate with dinner at a fancy restaurant. The roots of this favoritism weren't hard to trace. My mother, Amy, had her own baggage from the past. She'd often reminisce about her wedding day, which had apparently been ruined, when her prettier younger sister showed up in an inappropriate dress and attracted too much attention. "Your Aunt Susan couldn't stand not being the center of attention, even on my special day," Mom would lament, never noticing the irony in how she was recreating the same toxic dynamic with her own daughters. Despite the uneven playing field, I thrived. I worked hard, earned scholarships, and built a successful career as a marketing executive at a respected firm in Boston. My natural aptitude for connecting with people and strategic thinking had propelled me up the corporate ladder. At 30, I had financial stability, a beautiful apartment, and the freedom to travel. My long, chestnut hair had become something of a signature. I'd been growing it since college, and it now reached my waist in glossy waves that I admittedly took great pride in maintaining. Rebecca's path had been more tumultuous. Despite our parents' constant support and financial bailouts, she struggled to find direction. She'd hop between jobs, never lasting more than a year, and cycled through relationships that inevitably imploded. Each failure was met with our parents' unwavering support and explanations that none of it was Rebecca's fault. The boss was unfair, the boyfriend was commitment-phobic, the world simply didn't recognize her special talents. When Rebecca announced her engagement to Andrew Carlisle, everyone was surprised. Andrew was the son of our parents' longtime friends, a successful architect who'd recently taken over his father's firm. He was kind, stable, and most shockingly, seemed genuinely in love with Rebecca. I was happy for her, despite our complicated relationship. Andrew and I had been childhood friends before geography, and life pulled us in different directions. We'd spent summers catching frogs in the creek behind our houses and building elaborate forts in his family's wooded backyard. As teenagers, we'd shared an easy camaraderie untainted by awkward romantic tension. I hadn't seen much of him in recent years, but I remembered him as someone with integrity and warmth. As the wedding planning began, my parents' anxiety ratcheted up to unprecedented levels. My mother called daily with updates and concerns. My father, normally more reserved, began emailing me articles about appropriate sister of the bride etiquette. The message was clear. Don't do anything to take attention away from Rebecca. Diana, you'll be wearing the sage green bridesmaid dress we selected. My mother informed me 6 months before the wedding. And please, nothing dramatic with your appearance before the wedding. Rebecca wants everything to be perfect. I agreed, having no intention of causing drama. I was genuinely happy that Rebecca had found someone who seemed good for her, and I wanted her day to be special. But as the wedding approached, the comments about my appearance grew more frequent and pointed. Are you planning to cut your hair before the wedding? Rebecca asked during a bridal shopping trip. Long hair like that might overwhelm the bridesmaid dresses. You're not going to wear much makeup, right? She questioned another time. I'm going for a natural bridal look, and I don't want to be outshined. Maybe you could wear flats instead of heels, she suggested, measuring her height against mine. I don't want to look short in the photos. Each comment stung, but I brushed them off. This insecurity had been nurtured by our parents for decades, and I understood the deep-seated nature of Rebecca's competitive feelings toward me. I kept reminding myself that it was her wedding, and some degree of bridal self-centeredness was normal. I was determined to be supportive, so I agreed to the sage green dress that washed out my complexion, promised to wear minimal makeup, and packed flat shoes for the big day. The weekend of the wedding arrived, and I drove to my parents' house in Connecticut where the celebration would take place. The ceremony was planned for the local church where we'd grown up, with the reception in the beautifully landscaped backyard of my parents' colonial home. I arrived Friday afternoon, the day before the wedding, with my bridesmaid dress carefully hung in a garment bag and a genuine desire to help make my sister's day special, despite the undercurrent of tension. Little did I know that beneath the surface, a plan had already been set in motion, one that would forever change our family dynamic and force long-buried truths into the light. I arrived at my childhood home on Friday afternoon, the day before the wedding. The house was transformed, flowers everywhere, rented chairs stacked in the garage, and a massive tent being erected in the backyard. My mother greeted me with a distracted hug, her attention immediately returning to directing the florist on proper centerpiece placement. Diana, you're here. Your old room is ready. Rebecca and the bridesmaids are getting their nails done. They'll be back for the rehearsal dinner at 6. She barely looked at me as she spoke, her eyes narrowing slightly as they drifted to my hair. You really couldn't have trimmed it a bit before coming? I ignored the comment and carried my bags upstairs. My childhood bedroom had been preserved like a time capsule from high school, swimming trophies I'd won, debate team certificates, and photos of friends long since lost touch with. I changed clothes and went down to help with wedding preparations, trying to make myself useful despite being consistently directed away from any meaningful tasks. We've got it handled, my father said, intercepting me as I tried to help arrange welcome bags. Why don't you just relax until dinner? Relegated to the sidelines, I sat on the porch swing with a book. Through the open dining room window, I could hear Rebecca's voice as she returned from her nail appointment with her bridesmaids, all childhood friends I barely knew despite growing up in the same town. Mom, did you see Diana's hair? Rebecca's voice carried clearly. It looks even longer than in the Christmas photos. She's doing this on purpose. Honey, I'm sure she's not, my mother responded, though her tone lacked conviction. You don't understand. Rebecca's voice rose. Andrew mentioned how beautiful her hair was when we ran into her last month. She's trying to outshine me at my own wedding. She's always been jealous of me. I sat frozen on the swing, book forgotten in my lap. The irony of her accusation was staggering. She had been the one showered with attention, advantages, and excuses our entire lives, yet somehow I was the jealous one. What do you want us to do, Rebecca? My father's voice now unusually stern. It's her hair. I don't know. Something. Anything. Rebecca's voice cracked. This is supposed to be my special day, and once again, Diana will steal the spotlight just by showing up. Their voices lowered, and I couldn't make out the rest of the conversation. I remained on the porch, unsettled but determined not to let Rebecca's insecurities ruin the weekend. When I finally went inside, Rebecca greeted me with a tight hug and forced smile, as if the conversation I'd overheard had never happened. The rehearsal dinner that evening was tense but manageable. I gave a polite toast as sister of the bride, carefully worded to focus entirely on Rebecca and Andrew's relationship. I caught Andrew's eye as I spoke, and he gave me a warm smile of appreciation. We chatted briefly afterward, reminiscing about our childhood adventures and catching up on our current lives. It was easy and comfortable, untainted by the weird family dynamics swirling around us. "It's good to see you, Diana," he said sincerely. "I've missed our conversations." "You too," I replied. "I'm really happy for you and Rebecca." Rebecca appeared at his side moments later, looping her arm through his possessively and steering him away. I noticed my mother watching this interaction with a concerned expression. By the time I went to bed that night, I was emotionally exhausted but optimistic that we could get through the wedding day without drama. I set my alarm for 7 a.m., knowing the hair and makeup team would arrive at 8 for the bridesmaids. I carefully brushed out my long hair before sleep, admiring the way it caught the light from my bedside lamp. I'd always loved my hair. It was one physical attribute I allowed myself to feel genuine pride in. I fell asleep quickly in my childhood bed, the familiar sounds of the house settling around me. The scream that tore from my throat the next morning wasn't planned or theatrical. It was pure, visceral shock. I'd woken naturally before my alarm, my hand automatically reaching up to brush hair from my face as I blinked awake. Instead of the expected length, my fingers met air, then the blunt edge of hair at my chin. I bolted upright, hands frantically feeling around my head and neck, refusing to believe what my fingers were telling me. I scrambled out of bed and rushed to the mirror. The reflection that greeted me was a nightmare. My waist-length hair was gone, chopped into an uneven, choppy bob that ended at my jawline. The cut was clearly amateur, uneven, with some pieces shorter than others. Locks of my hair lay scattered on the floor around the bed, evidence of the crime. The second scream brought footsteps running. My bedroom door opened, and my parents stood in the doorway. Their expressions confirmed everything: guilt, defiance, and underneath, a terrible certainty that they had done the right thing. "What have you done?" I whispered, voice shaking with rage and disbelief. "What have you done?" My mother stepped forward, her chin raised defensively. "Diana, try to understand. It's Rebecca's special day. You cut my hair while I was sleeping?" I couldn't believe the words coming out of my mouth. It seemed too surreal, too violating to be true. "We didn't have a choice," my father said, his voice maddeningly calm. "You've always tried to outshine your sister. We couldn't let you ruin her wedding day." Ruin her? By existing? By having hair? I was shaking now, gathering the long strands from the floor as if I could somehow reattach them. "It's just hair," my mother said dismissively. "It'll grow back." "Rebecca needs this day to be perfect." "Perfect." I laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "You violated me while I was asleep in your home. You physically altered my body without my consent. And you think that makes today perfect?" The bedroom door opened wider, and Rebecca appeared behind my parents. Her expression shifted rapidly, first shock, then a barely concealed satisfaction, followed by manufactured concern. "Oh my God, Diana. Your hair. What happened?" Her performance was almost convincing. "Like you don't know," I spat. "This was your idea, wasn't it?" Rebecca's eyes darted to our parents, then back to me. "I don't know what you're talking about. Mom, Dad, what's going on?" The innocent act made my blood boil. I pushed past them all and locked myself in the bathroom, sliding down against the door as tears finally came. The violation was profound. Not just the hair itself, though that was devastating enough, but the breathtaking betrayal from the people who should love and protect me. Through the door, I could hear them arguing in harsh whispers. "She can't leave," Rebecca was saying. "People will ask questions." "She'll calm down," my father assured her. "Diana's always been reasonable." "It's just hair," my mother repeated, her new mantra apparently. "She's overreacting." I sat on the bathroom floor for nearly an hour, cycling through shock, grief, rage, and finally, a cold, clear determination. I would not give them the satisfaction of my absence. I would not be the villain in their story by ruining the wedding with my disappearance.
No, I would stay.
And they would regret what they had done. When I finally emerged from the bathroom, they were waiting, Rebecca in her bridal robe, my parents hovering anxiously. Diana, be reasonable, my mother started. Everyone's arriving in a few hours. The photographer will be here soon. You need to pull yourself together, my father added. This family needs to present a united front today. Rebecca stepped forward, eyes wide with manufactured concern. Diana, I had nothing to do with this, but please don't ruin my wedding day. Please. I looked at each of their faces, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, and made my decision. I'll stay, I said quietly. I'll be at your wedding, Rebecca. Don't worry. The relief on their faces was palpable, but premature. They had no idea what I was planning. I need to make a few calls, I said, picking up my phone. I need to see if anyone can fix this. I gestured to my butchered hair. They nodded eagerly, already convincing themselves that the crisis had been averted. They filed out of my room, closing the door behind them, leaving me alone with my phone and my determination. My fingers trembled slightly as I made the first call, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of what I was about to set in motion. My first call was to Jasmine, my friend who owned an upscale salon in town. Despite it being early on a Saturday, she answered on the third ring. Jazz, I need an emergency appointment. Right now. My voice cracked as I explained what had happened. Those monsters, she breathed when I finished. Come right over. I'll be waiting. I slipped out of the house while my family was busy with wedding preparations, leaving a note that I was getting my hair fixed. In my car, I made my second call. To Emma, Andrew's cousin, who was a professional photographer and would be attending the wedding. Emma, it's Diana Lockwood. We met at Andrew and Rebecca's engagement party. After quickly reestablishing our connection, I took a deep breath. I need your help with something today, and it involves documenting some evidence. 20 minutes later, I sat in Jasmine's salon chair, staring at my reflection while she assessed the damage. They did a number on you, she said, gently turning my head to see all angles of the hatchet job. But we can work with this. What are you thinking? Make it deliberate, I said, meeting her eyes in the mirror. Make it look like I chose this. Make it stunning. A slow smile spread across Jasmine's face. How brave are you feeling? After what just happened? Bulletproof. Jasmine worked her magic for the next hour, transforming the butchered bob into a sleek, sophisticated pixie cut that emphasized my cheekbones and eyes. The style was edgy, confident, and undeniably intentional. As she finished styling it, I couldn't help but smile at the transformation. It's perfect, I said, touching the short strands in wonder. It looks like I chose this. You look amazing, Jasmine assured me. Absolutely stunning. Emma arrived as Jasmine was finishing up. Holy shit, Diana. Your hair looks incredible. Thanks. Can you take some before and after photos? I asked, showing her the pictures I'd taken of the botched haircut. I need to document what happened. Emma's expression grew serious as I explained everything. That's seriously messed up. Don't worry, I'll help you get evidence today. I'll be shooting the wedding anyway, so no one will question me having my camera everywhere. Armed with a stunning new haircut and an ally, I returned to my parents' house just as the makeup artist was finishing with Rebecca. All conversation stopped as I walked into the living room. Rebecca's eyes widened in horror, not because I looked bad, but because I looked good. Very good. Diana, what have you done? My mother gasped. I fixed your handiwork, I replied coolly. Since I had no choice but to work with what you left me. But my father seemed at a loss for words. You should thank me, I continued, my voice level. I could have just gone home and skipped the whole wedding. Instead, I'm here, fulfilling my duties as sister of the bride. I turned to the makeup artist. I'm ready whenever you are. The makeup artist, sensing the tension, quickly ushered me to her chair. As she worked, I could hear my parents and Rebecca whispering furiously in the kitchen. I didn't care. The shocked looks on their faces had been worth the price of my hair. The makeup artist did an excellent job creating a look that complemented my new haircut, smoky eyes and defined cheekbones that I would never have chosen with my previous style. When she finished, I looked sophisticated, elegant, and nothing like the washed-out bridesmaid my sister had envisioned. "You look gorgeous," she whispered as she packed up her supplies. "Whatever's going on here, good luck." I changed into my sage green bridesmaid dress, which somehow looked less frumpy with my new haircut. The focus was now on my face rather than being overwhelmed by the unflattering color. We arrived at the church an hour before the ceremony. Rebecca refused to look at me, while my parents kept shooting me nervous glances. I performed my bridesmaid duties flawlessly, helping Rebecca with her veil, holding her bouquet during the photo session, smiling appropriately for the photographer. Emma, true to her word, was documenting everything. She pulled me aside briefly between formal photos. "I've got shots of their faces when they look at you," she murmured. "Pure guilt. And I overheard your mom telling your dad they might have gone too far. Whatever you're planning, you've got support." The ceremony proceeded without incident. I stood beside the other bridesmaids, played my part perfectly, and even managed to look genuinely happy for Rebecca and Andrew during their vows. Because despite everything, Andrew was a good person, and I did want him to be happy. I just wasn't sure my sister was the person who could make that happen. After the ceremony, while the bride and groom were taking photos, I circulated among the guests, focusing particularly on elderly relatives who had known our family for years. "Aunt Mildred, it's so good to see you," I said, embracing my father's aunt, a sharp-eyed woman in her 80s. "Diana, what happened to your beautiful hair?" she exclaimed. I leaned in close. "Actually, that's an interesting story. Mom and Dad cut it while I was asleep last night. They thought I might outshine Rebecca otherwise." Aunt Mildred's eyes widened. "They did what?" "I know, shocking, isn't it? But it's just the latest in a lifetime of similar incidents." Aunt Mildred shook her head slowly. "Your mother was always jealous of her sister, you know. Couldn't stand that Susan was naturally prettier. I'm not surprised she's passing that poison on." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, tell me more about that." Throughout the post-ceremony mingling, I had similar conversations with key relatives and family friends, strategically sharing what had happened without seeming bitter or vindictive. Just stating facts in a calm, somewhat bewildered tone. The reactions were universally shocked, followed by stories of their own observations of the favoritism over the years. Uncle Gerald, 3 whiskeys in before the reception even started, was particularly forthcoming. "Your grandpa Lawrence knew what was happening," he confided. "Left you that separate trust for college that your parents couldn't touch. He saw how they favored Rebecca." "I never knew that," I said, genuinely surprised. "I thought my scholarship covered everything." "Scholarship covered part," he corrected. "Trust covered the rest. Your parents hated that they couldn't control it. Lawrence made me the trustee specifically because he knew they'd try to redirect it to Rebecca if they could." This revelation staggered me. My grandpa had died when I was 15, but apparently he'd seen the truth and tried to protect me in his own way. I felt a rush of posthumous gratitude toward him. By the time we all moved to the reception in my parents' backyard, I had collected a wealth of family history and had laid groundwork with nearly half the guests. Emma had been quietly documenting everything, capturing candid photos of my interactions and, more importantly, my family's nervous hovering. I spotted Andrew at the edge of the tent, momentarily alone as Rebecca was surrounded by her bridesmaids. I approached him with a genuine smile. "Congratulations, Andrew. I'm truly happy for you." His eyes widened slightly as he took in my new appearance. "Diana, wow. You look amazing. Different, but amazing." "Thanks. It was a recent change." We fell into easy conversation about his firm's recent projects and my marketing work. It felt natural and comfortable, the way our friendship had always been. I was careful not to monopolize him or do anything that could be construed as flirtatious. This wasn't about trying to steal my sister's husband. It was about exposing the truth. As we talked, I noticed Rebecca watching us with increasing agitation. She finally marched over, placed a possessive hand on Andrew's arm, and practically dragged him away. I caught Emma's eye across the tent. She gave me a subtle thumbs up, indicating she'd captured the moment. Phase 1 was complete. I had transformed their sabotage into an asset, documented the evidence, and begun spreading the truth. Now it was time for Phase 2. The reception was in full swing under the elegant white tent in my parents' backyard. String lights twinkled overhead, the band played softly, and waitstaff circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. To anyone looking in from the outside, it was a picture-perfect wedding celebration. But beneath the surface, currents of tension were swirling. I moved through the crowd with deliberate grace, stopping to chat with Andrew's family members, his business associates, and friends from his architectural firm. My approach was subtle. I wasn't trying to steal attention or make a scene. Instead, I was building connections and, where appropriate, gently correcting misconceptions. Diana, right? Rebecca's sister? Andrew's business partner, James, approached me at the bar. Rebecca mentioned you might not make it today. Something about an emergency at work. I raised an eyebrow, accepting my glass of champagne from the bartender. Really? That's strange. I've had this weekend blocked off for months. No work emergencies at all. Huh. James looked confused. She was quite specific about it. Said you were always putting work before family. How interesting, I replied with a small smile. Especially since I took 2 days off to be here and help with preparations. These little moments happened throughout the cocktail hour, discovering that Rebecca had been systematically bad-mouthing me to Andrew's circle, painting me as a workaholic who resented her happiness, or worse, as someone who had designs on Andrew himself. Your new haircut is so chic, Catherine, Andrew's mother, commented as we found ourselves together near the gift table. Very sophisticated. Thank you, I said. It was a very recent change. Catherine tilted her head. Rebecca mentioned you've always been impulsive. Is that what prompted such a dramatic cut before the wedding? I took a sip of champagne, considering my response carefully. This was a critical moment. Actually, Catherine, impulsive isn't a word many would use to describe me. I've had the same hairstyle since college. I lowered my voice slightly. The truth is rather shocking. I woke up this morning to find my parents had cut my hair while I slept. Apparently, they were concerned I might outshine the bride. Catherine's perfectly composed socialite expression slipped for a moment. They did what? I know, it sounds unbelievable, I replied, keeping my tone even. I could hardly believe it myself. But that's assault, Catherine whispered, genuine outrage flickering in her eyes. I've been trying to make the best of it, I said with a small shrug. It's Rebecca's day, after all. Catherine's gaze traveled across the tent to where my parents stood anxiously watching Rebecca. I always thought there was something off about how Amy talked about you, she murmured. So dismissive, while Rebecca could do no wrong. Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of more guests, but Catherine squeezed my arm before moving away. Find me later, she said quietly. I want to hear more. I continued my rounds, always pleasant, never causing a scene. I danced with elderly relatives, complimented the catering staff, and took photos with old family friends. To all outward appearances, I was the supportive sister performing her role perfectly. During a moment when the dance floor was packed and attention was elsewhere, I slipped into the house to use the restroom. As I approached the hallway bathroom, I heard voices from my father's study, Rebecca and my parents, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. I stopped, just out of sight. I don't understand how she's making that haircut work, Rebecca was saying, her voice tight with frustration. Everyone's complimenting her on it. This isn't how it was supposed to go. We did what you asked, my father replied, sounding weary. But cutting her hair might have been taking things too far, Rebecca. Taking things too far. Rebecca's voice rose slightly. After everything you've done for me my whole life, The one time I ask for something important. Shh, keep your voice down, my mother cautioned. Of course we want your day to be perfect, sweetie. We're just concerned about potential fallout. Diana seems to be handling things differently than we expected. She's talking to everyone, Rebecca said. All of Andrew's family, his colleagues. Who knows what she's telling them? She wouldn't make a scene, my father said, though he sounded uncertain. Diana's always been the reasonable one. The reasonable one. The responsible one. The one they could count on to take the high road while they catered to Rebecca's every whim. The familiar roles we'd all been playing for decades. This was your idea, Rebecca, my mother said suddenly. If there are consequences. My idea that you agreed to. Rebecca snapped back. Don't pretend you didn't grab the scissors yourself, Mom. I'd heard enough. I silently backed away and used the bathroom upstairs instead. When I came back downstairs, I made a detour through the kitchen where the catering staff was preparing dinner service. Rebecca's purse sat on the counter, likely left there when she'd come in for a makeup touch-up. The opportunity was too perfect to ignore. Making sure no one was watching, I quickly opened her purse and found her phone. Thanks to years of watching her unlock it, I knew her passcode hadn't changed. Andrew's birthday. I quickly scrolled through her recent texts and found a conversation with my mother from 3 days ago. Rebecca, I'm serious about Diana's hair. Andrew mentioned it twice last week. Mom, what do you expect us to do? She won't cut it if we ask. Rebecca, figure something out. This is MY Day. I took photos of the conversation with my own phone, as well as several other revealing exchanges about managing Diana at the wedding. Most damning was a text to her maid of honor. If Diana looks too good, spill red wine on her dress. Make it look like an accident. I returned her phone exactly as I'd found it and rejoined the reception, a new sense of calm settling over me. The evidence was mounting, and with it, my resolve strengthened. During dinner, I was seated at the head table, flanking the bride and groom with the other members of the wedding party. I maintained polite conversation, laughed at the best man's jokes, and appeared to all the world like the supportive sister I was supposed to be. But I was watching, observing the subtle dynamics between Rebecca and Andrew. The way she constantly interrupted him, the dismissive little gestures when he expressed an opinion she didn't share, the performative affection that didn't quite reach her eyes. Small things, perhaps meaningless in isolation, but forming a pattern that concerned me. Between the main course and dessert, I excused myself and sought out Catherine again. I found her at a table with Andrew's father and some family friends. Diana, join us, she invited, patting the empty chair beside her. We were just discussing your remarkable poise today. I smiled, taking the offered seat. Thank you. It's been an unusual day. I can imagine, Catherine said with feeling. I've been watching your parents. They can barely look you in the eye. It's a family dynamic with a long history, I explained. Then, lowering my voice, Catherine, there's something else you should know. I'm concerned about Andrew. Her expression sharpened. What do you mean? Has he mentioned Rebecca's financial situation to you? Catherine frowned. She told us she's doing well with her interior design business.
Why?
That's not entirely accurate, I said carefully. I discovered recently that she's carrying significant debt. Credit cards mainly, but also some personal loans with high interest rates. How significant? Catherine asked, her socialite mask slipping again. Over $50,000, I replied. And Andrew doesn't know. Catherine's eyes widened. She and Robert, Andrew's father, had built their architectural firm from nothing, and they were careful with money despite their current success. Financial dishonesty would be a serious concern for them. Are you certain? She pressed.
You had documentation. You showed her.
I came across it accidentally, but I verified the information. I'm only telling you because I care about Andrew, and I'm worried that Rebecca isn't being honest with him about important matters. Catherine nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me. I'll handle this discreetly. As I returned to the head table, I caught Rebecca watching me talk to Catherine, her expression a mixture of suspicion and fear. She had no idea what I discovered or what I was planning, but she sensed something was happening beneath the perfect wedding facade. The cake-cutting ceremony proceeded without incident. Andrew and Rebecca performed the traditional feeding of cake to each other, smiling for photos. But I noticed Catherine whispering to Robert, and both of them watching Rebecca with new, assessing eyes. The pieces of my plan were falling into place, building toward the moment when the truth would be impossible to ignore. As the band announced the father-daughter dance, I positioned myself near Emma, who had been documenting everything. "Almost time," I murmured. "Are you ready for the toast portion?" Emma nodded. "Everything's in place. And Diana? What they did to you is unforgivable. They deserve whatever comes next." I watched as my father twirled Rebecca around the dance floor, both of them beaming as if this was the happiest day of their lives. Perhaps for them it was. But the foundation of their happiness was built on lies, favoritism, and now, an act of violation that couldn't be undone. The father-daughter dance ended to applause, and the DJ announced it was time for toasts. The best man went first, telling appropriately edited stories about Andrew's college days. Then Rebecca's maid of honor gave a stilted speech about their friendship, carefully avoiding any mention of Rebecca's failed relationships before Andrew. What happened next wasn't in the official program. The DJ, who had been slipped $50 by Emma, announced, "And now, we'd love to hear from the sister of the bride, Diana." All eyes turned to me. Rebecca's face froze in panic. My parents looked like they might be ill, but I simply smiled, accepted the microphone, and stepped into the center of attention they had tried so desperately to keep me from. I stood in the center of the dance floor, microphone in hand, every eye in the tent fixed on me. This was the moment everything would change. I caught Emma's eye across the room. She gave me a subtle nod, camera ready. "For those who don't know me, I'm Diana, Rebecca's sister." I began, my voice steady. "First, I want to congratulate Rebecca and Andrew. Finding someone who truly sees you, values you, and chooses you is rare and precious." I paused, letting my gaze drift to Andrew, who was smiling encouragingly. "Andrew, I've known you since we were kids catching frogs in the creek. You've always been kind, honest, and genuine, qualities I've admired. I know you'll bring those same qualities to your marriage." I turned slightly toward Rebecca, whose smile was frozen on her face, eyes darting nervously between me and our parents. Rebecca and I have had a complicated relationship over the years, as siblings often do. Light laughter rippled through the crowd. But today isn't about the past. It's about new beginnings and truth. I ran my hand through my short hair, drawing attention to it deliberately. "Many of you have complimented my new haircut today. Thank you. It was a very recent change, just this morning, in fact." A puzzled murmur went through the guests. "I actually had waist-length hair when I went to sleep in my childhood bedroom last night." I kept my tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. Imagine my surprise when I woke up this morning to find it had been cut off while I slept. The murmur grew louder. Someone gasped, "Diana," my father called out warningly. I ignored him. You see, there was concern I might outshine the bride with my natural appearance. So my hair was cut without my consent while I was asleep. "Who would do such a thing?" called out an elderly great-aunt from the back. I smiled sadly. "Would you like to answer that, Mom?"
Dad?
Or perhaps the bride herself, since it was her idea? The tent fell completely silent. My mother half rose from her seat, then sank back down, face ashen. My father stared at the ground. Rebecca was shaking her head frantically, as if she could erase my words. "That's ridiculous." Rebecca finally sputtered into the silence. "Why would anyone believe such a crazy story?" "It does sound unbelievable," I agreed. "Fortunately, I have proof." I nodded to Emma, who projected a photo onto the screen that had been used earlier for the couple's photo montage. It showed my original hair from yesterday contrasted with the butchered cut from this morning, before Jasmine had fixed it. "Is that true?" Andrew turned to Rebecca, his expression shocked. "Did you have something to do with this?" "Of course not," Rebecca insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. "Diana's making this up because she's jealous." She's always been jealous of me. Actually, Catherine stood up from her table, her voice carrying clearly. Diana showed me the text messages, Rebecca. The ones where you specifically asked your parents to do something about her hair. The revelation sent another shock wave through the guests. Andrew's expression hardened as he looked between his new wife and my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Lockwood, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Did you cut Diana's hair while she was asleep in your home? My parents looked at each other, trapped. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice small but defensive. We were just trying to make Rebecca's day special. Diana has always overshadowed her. It's just hair, it will grow back. The collective gasp from the guests was audible. Several people stood up and moved away from my parents' table, physically distancing themselves from such an act. It was just a stupid haircut, Rebecca said desperately, trying to salvage the situation. Why are you trying to ruin my wedding over something so trivial, Diana? A stupid haircut? I repeated, keeping my voice level. You orchestrated an assault on your own sister because you were insecure. You've been lying to Andrew about me for months. You've been lying to his family about your financial situation. Andrew's head snapped toward Rebecca. What financial situation? Rebecca's face paled. She's lying. There's no financial situation. $53,000 in credit card debt, I stated calmly. Plus another $20,000 in personal loans. All hidden from you, Andrew. Is that true? Andrew demanded, his architect's precision now focused on this new information. Rebecca's composure cracked. How dare you? She screamed at me. This is MY Day. It's always been about you. Always Diana the perfect, Diana the successful, Diana the beautiful. For once, just once, it was supposed to be about me. Rebecca, Andrew's voice cut through her tirade. Answer the question. Is what Diana said about the debt true? The silence stretched for several seconds before Rebecca finally whispered, I was going to tell you after the honeymoon. Andrew closed his eyes briefly, processing this betrayal. When he opened them, he turned to my parents. And you too. You physically assaulted your daughter while she slept. What kind of people do that? My father finally found his voice. Now wait just a minute. This is a family matter that's being blown out of proportion. A family matter? Andrew cut him off. You violated Diana's bodily autonomy. That's not a family matter. That's abuse. The reception had completely derailed now. Guests were standing, whispering, some even gathering their belongings to leave. The perfect wedding was disintegrating before our eyes. Rebecca suddenly lunged toward me, trying to grab the microphone. Give me that. This is MY wedding. You're ruining everything. Andrew caught her arm gently, but firmly. Rebecca, stop. You're making this worse. Making it worse? She shrieked. She planned this. She's always been jealous of me. She's wanted Andrew for herself since we were kids. I shook my head, genuinely baffled by her delusion. Rebecca, I've been nothing but supportive of your relationship. I even stayed for your wedding after what you all did to me. I could have just left.
Then why didn't you? She spat.
Why didn't you just leave instead of humiliating me like this? Because the truth matters, I said simply. And because Andrew deserves to know who he really married. Andrew released Rebecca's arm and stepped back, the implications of the day's revelations clearly sinking in. I think I need some air, he said quietly, then walked out of the tent. Rebecca rounded on me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her carefully applied makeup. Are you happy now? You've ruined everything.
No, Rebecca, y rappelé soufflé.
You did that yourself when you decided your insecurity justified violating me. I handed the microphone back to the DJ, who stood frozen, unsure what to do next. The band awkwardly began playing again, but few people were in a mood to dance. Groups of guests huddled in conversation, many shooting concerned glances my way or disgusted looks toward my parents. Catherine approached me, placing a supportive hand on my arm. Diana, I am so sorry for what they did to you. No one deserves such treatment, especially from family. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched by her support. Andrew will need some time, she continued, glancing toward the tent exit where he had disappeared. This is a lot to process on what was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. I understand, I assured her. I never wanted to hurt Andrew. He deserves better. My parents attempted to approach me, but several guests, including Andrew's father Robert, physically blocked their path. I think you've done enough damage, he told them coldly. The wedding reception effectively ended there, though not officially. People began leaving in groups, making excuses about long drives home or early flights. The caterers looked confused, still holding trays of desserts that would go uneaten. I moved through the remaining guests, accepting their expressions of sympathy with grace, but not encouraging drama. I wasn't there to milk the situation, only to expose the truth. Emma found me near the gift table. I've documented everything, she assured me. The before and after hair photos, their admission, Rebecca's meltdown. It's all here if you need it. Thank you, I said, giving her a quick hug. I appreciate your help more than I can say. I spotted Andrew returning to the tent, his expression grim but composed. He walked directly to Rebecca, who was being consoled by her bridesmaids, and spoke to her quietly. She nodded tearfully, and they both left the tent together, presumably to have a private conversation that would determine the future of their hours-old marriage. My parents stood alone now, abandoned by their friends, family members giving them a wide berth. They looked small suddenly, diminished by the exposure of their true nature. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity, quickly extinguished by the memory of waking up violated in my childhood home. I decided it was time for me to leave. I had accomplished what I came to do. The truth was out, consequences were in motion, and staying longer would only prolong the spectacle. I found my purse, said a few gracious goodbyes to those still remaining, and walked toward my car, feeling lighter with each step. Behind me, the perfect wedding lay in ruins. But unlike my hair, some things couldn't be fixed with a skillful stylist and a new perspective. Some betrayals cut too deep for repair. I drove back to my Boston apartment that night, the 3-hour journey giving me time to process everything that had happened. My emotions cycled from vindication to sadness to a strange, hollow feeling that I couldn't quite name. By the time I unlocked my door and stepped into my quiet living space, exhaustion had overtaken everything else. The next morning, I woke to 57 missed calls, 32 voicemails, and over 80 text messages. My parents had called repeatedly, their voicemails evolving from angry demands to return their calls, to defensive justifications of their actions, to finally, tearful pleas for forgiveness. Rebecca had texted a stream of accusations and insults, followed by incoherent apologies, then more accusations. I listened to and read them all, but responded to none. Andrew had texted once. Can we talk when things settle down? This isn't about Rebecca. I just want to make sure you're okay. That was the only message I answered. I'm okay. Take the time you need. My phone continued to blow up throughout the day with messages from wedding guests, relatives, and friends who had heard about what happened. The story was spreading through family circles like wildfire, details becoming more dramatic with each retelling. I turned my phone to silent and spent the day in quiet self-care, reading, taking a long bath, and ordering my favorite takeout. On Monday morning, I returned to work as if nothing unusual had happened. My pixie cut drew compliments from colleagues, none of whom knew the traumatic circumstances behind the style change. I threw myself into my projects, finding comfort in the normalcy and structure of my professional life. It was Wednesday when the first major fallout from the wedding occurred. Catherine Carlisle called me directly at my office. Diana, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important, she began formally. Not at all, Catherine. What can I do for you? I wanted you to hear this from me rather than through the grapevine. Andrew has asked Rebecca for an annulment. I sat back in my chair, absorbing this news. I see. How is she taking it? Not well, Catherine said with remarkable understatement. She's staying with your parents. Andrew is with us. I'm sorry it came to this, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I hadn't set out to destroy Rebecca's marriage, only to expose the truth. Don't be, Catherine replied firmly. Andrew deserved to know who he was really marrying. The hair incident was just the visible part of a much deeper problem. After they left the reception, he discovered she'd been lying about much more than just the debt. I didn't ask for details. It wasn't my business, and frankly, I didn't want to know what other deceptions my sister had crafted. How are you doing, Diana? Catherine asked, her tone softening. What they did to you was unconscionable. I'm processing, I answered honestly. It's difficult to reconcile the people who raised me with people capable of such a violation. If you need anything, legal advice, a recommendation for a therapist, or just someone to talk to, please don't hesitate to call me, she offered. Robert and I both think very highly of you. After we hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen, not really seeing it. An annulment. The marriage that had been the catalyst for my parents' ultimate betrayal hadn't even lasted a week. Later that evening, my building's front desk called to inform me that my sister was downstairs, demanding to be let up. I sighed, knowing this confrontation was inevitable. Send her up, I told the concierge. 3 minutes later, a sharp knock on my door announced Rebecca's arrival. I opened it to find her looking dramatically different from the radiant bride of 4 days ago. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, her hair unwashed, her clothing rumpled. You've ruined my life, she said without preamble, pushing past me into the apartment. Hello to you too, Rebecca, I replied, closing the door. Would you like something to drink? Don't play nice with me, she snapped. Andrew wants an annulment. His parents are talking about suing me for fraud. Everyone we know is talking about what happened. Mom and Dad can barely leave the house because of the shame. Are you happy now? I studied my sister, seeing beyond the anger to the fear and pain beneath. No, Rebecca. I'm not happy. I'm sad that it came to this. I'm sad that you and our parents thought it was acceptable to violate me because of your insecurities. I'm sad that you lied to Andrew about important things. None of this makes me happy. It was just hair, she cried, the familiar refrain. It would have grown back. Was that worth destroying my marriage over? It wasn't just hair, I countered calmly. It was a physical violation while I was vulnerable and sleeping. It was the culmination of a lifetime of you being favored and accommodated at my expense. And I didn't destroy your marriage, the truth did. Rebecca paced my living room, agitated. You've always been so perfect, so smart, so put together, so naturally pretty. Do you have any idea what it's like living in your shadow? Mom and Dad might have given me more stuff, but they always respected you more. They were always secretly more proud of you. I blinked, genuinely surprised by this perspective. That's not how I experienced our childhood at all. Of course not. You were too busy succeeding at everything to notice. She collapsed onto my couch, suddenly deflated. I just wanted one day where I was the center of attention, where no one was comparing us and finding me lacking. For the first time, I saw our shared history through Rebecca's eyes, the gifts and attention as compensation for always feeling second best, not as evidence of preferential treatment. It didn't excuse what they'd done, but it provided context I hadn't considered. I'm sorry you felt that way, I said carefully. But cutting my hair while I slept wasn't the answer. Neither was lying to Andrew about your finances or trying to poison his family against me. Rebecca stared at her hands. I know, she whispered, surprising me. I just panicked. Every time Andrew mentioned you, I could see the admiration in his eyes. Not romantic interest, just respect. He never looked at me that way. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of decades of dysfunctional family dynamics hanging between us. What happens now? She finally asked, sounding younger and more vulnerable than I'd heard her in years. I don't know, I answered honestly. That depends on a lot of things, including whether you and our parents can acknowledge what you did and take responsibility for it. They're devastated, she said. Especially Dad. He keeps saying he never thought he'd become the kind of man who would hurt his daughter. Actions have consequences, I replied, not unkindly. For all of us. Rebecca stayed for another hour. We didn't resolve anything, but for perhaps the first time in our adult lives, we had an honest conversation. When she left, we didn't hug or make promises about the future. Some wounds were too fresh, the path forward still unclear. Over the next few weeks, the story continued to reverberate through our extended family and social circles. My parents finally sent a written apology, formal, stilted, but seemingly sincere in their remorse. I acknowledged it, but didn't immediately forgive them. That would take time, if it happened at all. Andrew reached out again, suggesting coffee as friends. I agreed, and we met at a neutral cafe halfway between Boston and Connecticut. He looked tired but resolute. The annulment is proceeding, he told me. Rebecca didn't contest it once I found out about the other deceptions. I'm sorry, I said again. Don't be. I'm not. He stirred his coffee thoughtfully. I think I always knew something wasn't quite right, but I ignored the signs. Your parents were so enthusiastic about our relationship, and Rebecca seemed to be everything they described. It wasn't until I saw how they treated you, someone they should love unconditionally, that I realized how manipulative they all were. They're not evil people, I found myself saying, surprising both of us. They're deeply flawed, with unhealthy patterns they've never addressed. It doesn't excuse what they did, but they're still your family, Andrew finished for me. I understand. As the weeks turned into months, life gradually found a new rhythm. I continued my therapy sessions, working through the complex emotions surrounding the wedding incident and my family history. My hair grew into a stylish bob that I decided to maintain, a reminder of my resilience rather than their betrayal. Rebecca moved to Chicago for a fresh start, taking a job with an interior design firm that one of Andrew's friends had kindly helped arrange despite everything. My parents sought counseling, finally confronting the toxic patterns they'd perpetuated. Whether their efforts would lead to genuine change remained to be seen. I received a surprising call from Uncle Gerald, who invited me to lunch. Your Grandpa Lawrence would be proud of you, he told me over sandwiches. He always said you had a backbone of steel beneath those quiet manners. I wish I'd known him better, I said. He knew what was happening in that house, Gerald continued. Set up that trust for you, because he saw how your parents favored Rebecca. He wanted to make sure you had options, could stand on your own feet. Thank you for telling me that, I said, feeling a connection to my grandfather I never fully appreciated before. The wedding album from Emma arrived by courier one afternoon. Inside was a note. Truth is always the best revenge. These are yours to use or destroy as you see fit. The photos documented everything. The before and after of my hair, my parents' guilty expressions, Rebecca's calculated satisfaction followed by her meltdown when the truth emerged. I put the album away in a closet, not needing it now but unwilling to discard it entirely. Catherine Carlyle became an unexpected ally and eventually a friend. We met for lunch monthly, carefully avoiding discussion of Rebecca unless absolutely necessary. Through her, I maintained a loose connection to Andrew, who was throwing himself into an ambitious new architectural project. 6 months after the wedding, I received a formal invitation to dinner at my parents' house. The card was handwritten by my mother, expressing their desire to begin rebuilding our relationship, if I was willing. I considered it carefully, discussing the invitation with my therapist before accepting with clear conditions about respecting my boundaries. The path forward wouldn't be easy. Trust, once shattered, couldn't be repaired overnight, if ever. But as I prepared for that first tentative dinner with my parents, I realized that the revenge I'd taken at the wedding wasn't really about punishing them. It was about finally standing up for myself, exposing the truth, and refusing to maintain the family fiction any longer. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't about making others suffer. It's about reclaiming your own power and refusing to be a victim. And sometimes, losing your hair helps you find your backbone. 1 year after the wedding incident, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, running my fingers through my hair, which had grown into a stylish, shoulder-length bob. I decided to keep it shorter than my previous waist-length style, partially because I genuinely liked how it framed my face, but also as a reminder of everything that had happened and how far I'd come. My phone chimed with a calendar reminder. Family dinner, 6 p.m. I took a deep breath, still finding these monthly dinners challenging despite the progress we'd made. After confirming with my therapist that I was ready, I'd agreed to these carefully structured reunions 6 months ago, with clear boundaries and expectations established in advance. The journey to this point had been complicated and nonlinear. After the wedding disaster, Andrew had indeed gone through with the annulment. The legal proceedings revealed even more deception on Rebecca's part. She had accumulated nearly $80,000 in debt, not just the $73,000 I discovered, and had been planning to use Andrew's wedding gift money from his parents to pay off her credit cards without telling him. Rebecca had moved to Chicago as planned, but her fresh start proved more difficult than anticipated. The interior design position fell through after 2 months, when her lack of experience became apparent. She bounced between jobs again before finally finding stability as an administrative assistant at a real estate firm. Humble work compared to her previous aspirations, but she seemed to be developing a healthier perspective on life. My relationship with her remained distant but civil. We exchanged occasional text messages, mostly on birthdays and holidays. She had started therapy too, beginning the long process of examining her insecurities and the jealousy that had defined our relationship for so long. Her last message had actually included a genuine apology, the first that felt truly sincere, acknowledging that what she'd done was inexcusable regardless of her feelings or insecurities. My parents had undergone the most dramatic transformation, or at least they were trying to. After weeks of denial and attempts to minimize what they'd done, the overwhelming social fallout and my continued estrangement finally broke through their defenses. They began seeing a family therapist who specialized in toxic dynamics and favoritism, confronting decades of unhealthy patterns. My father had written me a 12-page handwritten letter 6 months after the wedding, describing his shame and horror at his own actions. "I became the kind of man I always despised," he wrote. "Someone who would hurt his child to appease another. I will spend the rest of my life trying to understand how I failed you so completely and working to earn back even a fraction of your trust, if you'll allow it." My mother's journey had been rockier. Her own unresolved issues with her sister made it harder for her to see how she'd projected those feelings onto Rebecca and me. But she was trying reading books about family dynamics and meeting with her therapist twice weekly. She'd even reached out to her estranged sister Susan, beginning the process of healing that ancient wound. As for Andrew, we had developed a friendship independent of the family drama. He had moved forward with his architectural career, winning a significant commission to design an eco-friendly community center that had been featured in several design magazines. We met for coffee every few weeks, carefully maintaining appropriate boundaries while enjoying our natural rapport and shared interests. Whether something more might develop between us someday remained an open question, one neither of us was in a hurry to answer. I drove to my parents' house, a trip that no longer filled me with dread but still triggered a complex mixture of emotions. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed they'd repainted the front door. A small thing, but symbolic of the changes they were trying to make. My mother answered my knock, her face lighting up with a smile that still held traces of anxiety. "Diana, you're here."
Come in.
"Your father's just finishing up in the kitchen." The house looked different. They'd redecorated, removing many of the shrine-like elements to Rebecca's achievements and creating a more balanced representation of both their daughters. My swimming trophies now sat alongside Rebecca's dance awards. Photos of both of us were displayed equally. "Something smells good," I commented, following her into the living room. "Your father's making that lemon chicken you always liked," she replied. "Can I get you something to drink?" These interactions still felt somewhat stilted, carefully choreographed to avoid potential landmines. But they were trying, and so was I. My father emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Diana," he said warmly but cautiously, respecting the boundaries I'd established about physical contact. "It's good to see you."
That, raplia.
"Thanks for cooking." "Small way to show appreciation," he said, the unspoken context hanging between us. He was trying to demonstrate care in ways he'd failed to during my childhood. Dinner was pleasant, if somewhat reserved. We discussed safe topics, my work, their recent vacation to Maine, a new restaurant that had opened in town. After dessert, my father cleared his throat, signaling a shift to more serious conversation. "Your sister called yesterday," he said. "She's been offered a promotion at the real estate office. If she accepts, they'll pay for her to get her real estate license." "That's good news," I replied sincerely. Despite everything, I didn't wish Rebecca ill. "Is she going to take it?" "She thinks so," my mother said. "She seems different. More grounded. Her therapist thinks it's been good for her to earn things on her own merit." I nodded, sipping my coffee. "I'm glad she's finding her way." "Diana," my father said hesitantly, "there's something else we wanted to discuss with you. Something important." I tensed slightly, old defenses rising automatically. "What is it?" My mother reached for a folder on the sideboard and placed it on the table. "This is the deed to the house," she explained. "We've had it amended. It will pass equally to both you and Rebecca when the time comes." I stared at the folder, understanding the significance. Previously, I'd accidentally discovered that they'd planned to leave the house solely to Rebecca, considering it fair since they'd helped me less financially during my younger years. "We've also revised our will," my father added. "Everything will be divided equally. It should have been that way from the beginning." "This isn't about buying your forgiveness," my mother hurried to add. "We know material things can't make up for what we did. But we want to correct the imbalances we created, wherever we can." I felt tears prickling behind my eyes, not for the inheritance itself, which I didn't need, but for what it represented, acknowledgement of the favoritism that had shaped our family for decades. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." "There's one more thing," my father said, his voice unsteady. "We've been talking with Dr. Marshall about whether we should attend Rebecca's therapy session when we visit her next month. A sort of family session to address some of the dynamics directly. She's invited you as well, though she understands if you're not ready for that." I considered this carefully. "I'll think about it," I promised. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of intensity yet." They nodded, accepting my hesitation without pressure, another sign of their efforts to change. As the evening wound down, my mother walked me to the door. "I dream about your hair sometimes," she confessed suddenly, her voice small. "In the dream, I'm cutting it, and suddenly I realize what I'm doing, but I can't stop. I wake up crying." I looked at her, seeing the genuine remorse in her eyes. "It was never about the hair, Mom. It was about the betrayal. About a lifetime of messages that Rebecca's feelings mattered more than my dignity." "I know," she whispered. "I know that now. We didn't hug goodbye. We weren't there yet, but there was a moment of real connection, painful but honest." Driving back to Boston that night, I called Catherine Carlyle, who had become a surrogate maternal figure of sorts. "How did it go?" she asked. "Better than expected," I replied. "They're really trying. And how are you feeling about everything?" I considered this as I navigated the familiar highway. Still processing. Some days I feel I've moved past it, other days the hurt feels fresh. But I'm not letting it define me anymore. "You've handled this with remarkable grace," Catherine said. "Not everyone could find a path forward after such a betrayal." "I'm not sure. Exposing the truth in the middle of a wedding reception counts as graceful," I laughed. "It was justified," Catherine insisted. "And frankly, it saved Andrew from a marriage built on deception. Sometimes the most caring thing you can do is reveal an uncomfortable truth." After ending the call, I reflected on the past year and all that had changed. My career had flourished, I'd received a promotion, and was now leading my own team at the marketing firm. I developed stronger friendships, no longer keeping people at a distance out of fear they'd eventually favor someone else over me. I'd even started dating again, though nothing serious had developed yet. The following weekend, I met Andrew for a regular coffee. He looked particularly happy, with an energy I hadn't seen in months. "The community center project is fully funded," he announced as soon as I sat down. "We break ground next month." "That's fantastic," I said, genuinely pleased for him. Your design was brilliant. They're lucky to have you. Actually, he said, sliding a folder across the table, I wanted to get your opinion on something. Inside was a brochure for a design competition. Architects were invited to submit plans for an innovative women's shelter with trauma-informed design principles. I'm thinking of entering, he explained. The focus on creating spaces that promote healing and dignity really speaks to me. But I'd value your perspective on some of the marketing aspects of the proposal. We spent the next hour discussing the project, our conversation flowing easily between professional insights and personal reflections. As always, I felt completely comfortable with Andrew. No need to perform or impress, just genuine connection. Diana, he said as our meeting wound down, I've been wanting to ask you something. The slight change in his tone made me pay closer attention. What is it? Would you consider having dinner with me next weekend? Not coffee, not as friends discussing projects. An actual date. My heart skipped a beat. We'd been dancing around this possibility for months, both of us careful not to complicate our friendship while still working through the aftermath of the wedding disaster. Are you sure? I asked carefully. There's so much history there. Rebecca has nothing to do with this, he finished firmly. What happened between Rebecca and me is over. It's been over for a year. What I feel for you is entirely separate from that chapter of my life. And what do you feel? I asked, surprising myself with my directness. Admiration, respect, attraction. He smiled. I've always valued our connection, Diana. Even when we were kids. I'd like to explore what that might become if we give it a chance. But only if you're open to it too. I considered his words, the implications, the potential complications. I'd like that, I finally said. Dinner sounds perfect. His smile brightened the entire cafe. Later that week, I had my regular therapy session. Dr. Harris, who had guided me through the past year with wisdom and patience, listened as I updated her on all the recent developments. It sounds like you've reached a turning point, she observed. How do you feel about potentially dating Andrew, given the history with your sister? I've thought about that a lot, I admitted. A year ago, I would have said no automatically, worried about how it would appear or how it might hurt Rebecca. But I realize now that I'm allowed to pursue my own happiness. Rebecca and I are on different paths now, and while I don't want to hurt her, I also won't sacrifice potential joy to protect her feelings. Dr. Harris nodded approvingly. That's a healthy perspective. You're setting boundaries while still being compassionate. The wedding incident changed me, I reflected. Not just because of what they did, but because of how I responded. For the first time in my life, I stood up and said, this is not acceptable, instead of accommodating everyone else's needs above my own. Some might view your actions at the wedding as revenge, Dr. Harris noted. How do you see it now, with a year's perspective? I considered this carefully. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about truth. About refusing to participate in the fiction any longer. The most powerful thing I did wasn't exposing them, it was refusing to be silenced. As I left therapy and walked through the Boston Common, I felt a sense of peace that had been building gradually over the past year. The wedding day violation had been traumatic, but it had also been the catalyst for long overdue changes. My parents were finally acknowledging their favoritism and trying to change. Rebecca was building a life based on reality rather than fantasy. Andrew had escaped a marriage built on deception. And I had found my voice. I had set boundaries and held to them. I had discovered that speaking truth, even when painful, was ultimately more healing than maintaining comfortable lies. My phone buzzed with a text from Andrew, confirming our dinner plans for Saturday. I smiled, feeling open to the possibility of what might develop between us, free from the shadow of family dysfunction. That evening, I sat on my apartment balcony, watching the sunset paint the Boston skyline in shades of gold and pink. I ran my fingers through my bob, thinking about how sometimes our greatest growth comes from our deepest wounds. My parents' betrayal had been painful beyond words, but it had also been the breaking point that allowed truth to finally emerge. Sometimes family karma arrives in unexpected ways. Sometimes losing your hair helps you find your voice. And sometimes The best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living authentically, speaking truth, and refusing to be diminished by others' limitations. Have you ever experienced a moment when standing up for yourself changed everything? I'd love to hear your stories of family karma or how you've navigated complicated family dynamics. The journey through family betrayal is lonely, but sharing our stories helps us feel less alone. If this resonated with you, please subscribe to follow more of these real-life family stories and leave a comment sharing your experience. Your story matters, and your voice deserves to be heard. Thank you for being here with me through this journey, and remember, sometimes the family we choose becomes more important than the family we're born into. Like, subscribe, and share if you've ever had to set boundaries with toxic family members. Until next time, this is Diana, wishing you the courage to speak your truth.